Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah. We're going to start our first keynote speech here. So we have the great honor and pleasure to have with us today as our first keynote Dr. Robert Strom, the Director of Research and Policy at Marian Kaufman Foundation in the United States of America. And he's going to be talking to us about should we rethink higher education for the 21st century. And please join me to welcome Dr. Strom.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you for once again inviting me to participate in this forum. This is the third year I've had the opportunity to participate in the forum, and I just want to take just a minute before I start to reflect on changes over those 3 years. And simply being in this building is phenomenal. It's when we had our first advisory board meeting a couple of years ago and came to the site where the building was going to be built, it was a promise. Last year there was a shell of the building, and this year, our advisory board meeting yesterday, there was an incredible amount of activity in this building, and there are companies being formed, and the activity is just unbelievable. But it's really so much more than the building. It's the people and the program that are in this building, and Weil and his colleagues are the wonderful job that's going on here of incubating businesses, and beyond that, the ecosystem, and that will lead into my comments on the University of the 21st Century. But the partnership between Saudi Aramco and KFUPM in this building, and the synergies that will take place when you bring bright, ambitious people together, people who are willing to take risks, bring them together for the purpose of starting and growing new businesses. I look forward to next year just to see the continued progress. And really, when we deal with the question of should we rethink higher education in the 21st century, we're doing it. This is what's happening here. The essential mission of the university has historically been the production and dissemination of knowledge. And while I believe this mission will remain constant, will remain the same during the 21st century, the manner in which universities produce and disseminate knowledge will and must undergo radical change, and we're a part of that radical change even now. Indeed, the university has held true to this mission of the production and dissemination of knowledge since its inception. But even as it has evolved and adapted to societal changes throughout its history, the evolution from an agricultural to an industrial to a service economy was accompanied by a wide range of university changes that led to the institution that we know today. As our economy shifts again to a knowledge economy, universities must adapt anew to this transformation. This time, however, change is happening much more rapidly. And in order to expand its relevance in the knowledge economy, the 21st century university must accelerate the change process that has historically taken place at a very deliberate pace. And this is indeed the challenge for the university. You know, one would think that being in a knowledge economy, this should be the university's sweet spot. The university is a knowledge producer and a knowledge disseminator. But it clearly provides challenges for the university, because in this age of a knowledge economy, an electronic age, knowledge is not the exclusive jurisdiction of the university anymore. Historically, universities look an awful lot like they always have. Last year, before attending this conference, I had the opportunity to give a talk and participate in a program at the University of Bologna, the very first university that was established. And the irony of being there last year at this time before coming to this conference and coming here and being asked to give a talk on the University of the 21st century, 10 centuries later, gave me an opportunity to kind of pause and reflect as I was thinking of preparing this talk. And what I remember, and unfortunately I probably should have put a photo of the University of Bologna on the slide. I think this is a stock photo of Harvard from somewhere. What I remember about the University of Bologna is that if you walk on that campus, it looks and feels a lot like a university of the 21st century. The buildings, the interaction among faculty and students look and feel very much the same. But we've come through a medieval period, a renaissance, an agricultural, industrial, a service economy, and now to a knowledge economy. And the university sometimes has trouble adapting to those changes. In the U.S., it wasn't until the 1860s, 1862, that the Congress passed something called the Morrill Act, which established land-grant universities. Land-grant universities had as their purpose learning related to agriculture, the production and distribution of knowledge relating to agriculture. 1862, we had been an agricultural economy for some time. In fact, later during my talk, I'm going to ask Professor Joe Pecknick from Purdue University, a land-grant university, to talk a little bit about land-grant universities and how their mission is changing and adapting to the 21st century. About the same time as the Morrill Act, in the U.S., a university was founded in Massachusetts, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, a private university as opposed to the land-grant universities, which were public universities, and a university with which KFUPM faculty have done quite a bit of work. And the MIT was founded in response to increased industrialization in the U.S. We had been an industrial economy for some time, and now MIT was founded in response to that increased industrialization. MIT adopted the European Polytechnic model of lab instruction in applied sciences and engineering, and in a period of roughly 150 years since its founding, MIT has taken that mission of applied science and technology and become an incredibly entrepreneurial university. By some estimates, by some research, it's estimated that all the companies started by MIT faculty and students combined would be the 11th largest nation in the world in terms of its GDP. So universities have had and will continue to have a substantial impact on the economy, and in no small measure through an entrepreneurial mission of universities. Well, how does that happen? How does that happen in a 21st century economy with what I maintain will be a similar mission of the production and distribution of knowledge applied to the three principal activities of the university, teaching, research, and outreach. Well, let me talk first about the teaching mission of the university and apply the teaching mission of the university to the entrepreneurial process. Early in the teaching of entrepreneurship, which really goes back not much more than 50 years in universities, the teaching of entrepreneurship was really limited to teaching about the phenomenon of entrepreneurship, from idea generation through a variety of steps to the formation of a firm and to the exit of a firm. And it was typically done so in business management programs and by some really wonderful instructors who felt that it wasn't only the large corporations that we should be concerned with, but it was the small startups. And if you think about 1950s and 1960s, what the U.S. economy looked like, it was clearly dominated by those large corporations. So early on, it was teaching about that entrepreneurial process, very much in a business management kind of format. But what's changed and evolved over the past 50 years is teaching more about entrepreneurship and innovation in a discipline-specific concept. So no longer really limited to business schools, although business schools are certainly an important part of that process, but teaching entrepreneurship in a discipline-specific process. So in the social and behavioral process, the social and behavioral sciences, in the context of history, in the hard sciences, in my own discipline of economics, prior prior to moving to the Kauffman Foundation 20 years ago, most of my life had been spent as an academic economist. And in making that transition 20 years ago, I sort of stopped and thought that here I'd been teaching economics for 25 years, teaching a lot of microeconomics, but rarely mentioned the entrepreneur in an economics course. Early on, the second or third Nobel Prize in economics went to an economist named Robert Solow. And Bob Solow won the Nobel Prize for his work in economic growth. And one of the features of Solow's growth theory is something called the Solow residual. And the Solow residual implies that about 50% of economic growth is unexplained. Well, where does that economic growth come from? And most of it comes from endogenous growth, from growth that comes within the starting of new firms, within innovation. And economists had long ignored or not been able to measure that growth from a macroeconomic perspective, and therefore from a microeconomic perspective didn't include much economics in the theory of the firm. I taught the theory of the firm, and I probably started about 1,000 lectures with 3 words: assume a firm. Well, you can't assume a firm. Firms come from somewhere. And the interesting question is how and where and why do those firms begin? How do they exist? How do they grow? What happens when they die? Those sorts of issues, and not the more mundane issues of trying to optimize behavior of the firm to find that unique price and quantity combination to maximize short-run profits. So there are really interesting questions in a variety of disciplines that bear upon entrepreneurship. And not the least of which is in the history of sciences. So what's happened over these past 40 or 50 years is that entrepreneurship has really become much more of a cross-campus phenomenon. It's become much more of a phenomena where regardless of the area of the university in which one is operating, certainly entrepreneurship and innovation has had, is having, and will continue to have a strong impact on what's going on at that university. And rather than me talking about what's going on at universities that are doing a good job with cross-campus entrepreneurship, it seemed more appropriate to have my colleague and fellow advisory board member, Dr. Bernie Carlson from the University of Virginia, talk about for just a few minutes about what's going on at the University of Virginia in that context. I'll cede the podium to Bernie and then come back in a few minutes. So Bernie, if you would, kind of share a little bit about what's going on at the University of Virginia in a cross-campus context on entrepreneurship. Thanks.
Thank you, and it's also a great pleasure to be here and to spend some time with you. This is my 3rd chance to be in the kingdom. And indeed, what I want to do is illustrate for a moment, provide an example of exactly what Dr. Strom was talking about, that entrepreneurship over the last couple of decades has shifted from being something that is always and traditionally focused in, or located in a business school or an economics context. And indeed, my university has come to exemplify that. And I want to say just a few words about how we actually approach that. So at the University of Virginia, we were founded by the 3rd President of the United States, Thomas Jefferson. After he was president, he had to decide what he wanted to do, and he came back to his home state of Virginia, and he decided that what was really needed was a new kind of university, and indeed the first public university in the United States. Jefferson, as you may know, was fascinated by science and technology. He was a man of what historians call the Enlightenment, the late 18th century, and he really believed that science and technology were going to improve the lot of mankind, or humankind. And so when he planned the university in 1819, he included a professor of natural philosophy who was also going to teach engineering classes. And indeed, the University of Virginia actually had one of the first engineering programs in the United States, founded in 1836. We like to say that MIT got some inspiration from us. Now, why did Jefferson care about technology and engineering as part of the university? He believed that you had to innovate, you had to adapt the technology to the kind of society that you wanted to live in. He believed that, he was helping to create, he was the author of the Declaration of Independence, he was creating a unique kind of society, a democratic republic. And whatever kind of technology Americans were supposed to have, it had to serve those democratic values. And so across the university, we continue to ask this question. We continue to challenge students, not just to be innovators for the sake of innovation, but to focus on how innovation can be directed toward the goals of a particular society. And this is a question that I insist that is at the heart of 21st engineering, engineering in the 21st century, which is how can you make technology serve the goals and the goals and the values of a particular society. Now, Jefferson also, in order to combine technology with democratic values, he actually indeed created a little village that he called the Academical Village. And indeed, if you come to the university, you can still see the buildings that you see in this painting. And what's important about this is the village was consisted of 10 big houses he called pavilions, each of which had a professor, and the students all lived in the little rooms in between there. And they worked together towards this common goal of doing any number of things, but particularly advancing a notion of what was going to be a democratic republic. And that approach today is still reflected in the way we approach entrepreneurship. We don't see entrepreneurship at my university as being solely the domain of the business school or solely the domain of engineering. It indeed is a collective enterprise that is pursued by all of the schools in the university. And as one of my colleagues likes to say, borrowing from Hillary Clinton, it takes an academical village to do entrepreneurship. And the labels on this particular image are, which is laid over a photograph of the university, are all of the different faculties. So Darden is one of the business faculties, architecture. Curry is not the school for the study of Indian food, it's actually our education faculty. I was embarrassed, I used this slide with some Chinese visitors about a week ago, and they came up and they were very worried that we actually had a school of Indian food. But the Curry is the school of education. C's is my home faculty. That's the School of Engineering. But and obviously there's nursing, medicine. McIntyre is another business faculty. Batten is our School of Public Policy, and we have arts and sciences. Together, that collective, all people from each of those universities pursuing, as Dr. Strom said, entrepreneurship in a discipline-specific way. I worry about how entrepreneurship should be adapted to engineering. I have colleagues that worry about how it should be adapted to architecture, to nursing, to each of those. But in operating in this ecosystem and working as a collective, we share courses, we share programs, we share coordinators and mentors. We have student organizations that span all the different schools. We have competitions similar to the competitions that you have here for entrepreneurship. We have one big competition for the entire university. It's the Entrepreneurship Cup. And we have shared facilities and creative spaces. But what I want to just finish up with as a very specific example of how we work together is something that you're working on at KFUPM, which is an entrepreneurship minor. We have just actually introduced our own entrepreneurship minor at the University of Virginia. Now, this is a minor that is open to students all across the university, that is to say undergraduates, and it has a number of features. Now, I'm going to try to use the pointer. Oops. Nope. There. This one. Ah, perfect. Thank you, sir. Okay. So it starts with a general introductory course, which is called Startup, and that students take that before they actually go into the minor. That then branches out in an interesting way. Some students want to go on into technology entrepreneurship and come over to my school and take a variety of courses that we offer. Others want to be involved in social entrepreneurship. That is to say, they are concerned with creating ventures that are not so much worried about creating profits or being private enterprises, but trying to accomplish social goals and add value to communities. They're not necessarily always charitable organizations or NGOs. They can take a variety of forms. But for those students, they will spend time more in the College of Arts or they often come from the College of Arts and Sciences, and they go into the policy school. Now, the really important feature is these electives that the students take. As you can see, they take 3 of them, and they can come from any number of areas. They can come from the law school, they can come from one of the business schools in finance, they can be in operations, or they can also be in innovation. And in fact, our role in the engineering school's role is to provide a large number of these electives specific to technology, but also useful for if you're pursuing social entrepreneurship. And the students finish up with either a project-based capstone, or which can be that they're going to come up with an innovation, or that they can actually launch a venture or a new startup. An important point about this example is just to support what Dr. Strom was saying, is that entrepreneurship can be practiced in a variety of ways in different universities, but one of the most powerful ones is to combine forces across a number of different faculties to achieve what Dr. Musa shared with us in a paper that he just recently written, is that entrepreneurs have to do three things well. They have to worry about technological feasibility, they have to worry about economic viability, and they have to worry about whether their innovations are socially and culturally desirable. Jefferson was very much thinking about what, from a political standpoint, was going to be desirable. But feasibility, viability, and desirability, if those are things that innovations, those are things that entrepreneurs bring together, then we need to be working across disciplinary boundaries and illustrating that larger vision. So I hope that's a useful example, and I'm going to turn the podium and the controller back to Dr. Strom.
Okay, Bernie, thanks so much. It really is becoming a phenomenon in U.S. universities, the notion of a cross-campus minor in entrepreneurship. And it's having large benefits, obviously, for students and for the community in general. But it's also encouraging university faculty to talk to one another across disciplines about common interests. Second mission, function of universities is clearly the research mission. And research mission is very strong here. Typically, entrepreneurship research was and still is about new business formation and growth, and about the birth of businesses, how do businesses come into being, how and why do they grow, what happens when firms die. A substantial body of research, primarily in the business discipline journals, about business formation and growth. Secondly, and more recently, is research about the economic impact of entrepreneurship. Dr. Carlson mentioned Weil's recent paper about the economic viability of firms. And what's become very important here, and what's become very obvious in this line of research, is that if we're looking to entrepreneurship as a means of economic growth, whether it's at a regional level, a national level, a global level, the kinds of entrepreneurship that contributes to economic growth is what's sometimes called innovative entrepreneurship, the kind of entrepreneurship that's going on at this place, at KFUPM, versus entrepreneurship, which is sometimes characterized as replicative entrepreneurship. Both very, very important. But if we're looking to entrepreneurship as a means of growth, it's that innovative entrepreneurship, and it's for a long time, research thought it was small businesses that contributed so much to job creation. But more recently, with better data, we've begun to understand that it's not necessarily small business, but it's young, growing businesses that contribute to the economic growth of a region or a nation. And that's so important in what's going on here in trying to establish young, growing businesses in the kingdom that are going to contribute to the future economic growth of the kingdom and to job creation. And finally, related to entrepreneurship research is traditional research in the basic and applied sciences. But that research, basic and applied research in the sciences, but that research, much of that has commercial application. And being able to utilize the university's resources and the community's resources jointly to take that research and bring that research to some commercially viable sense is really incredibly important. The rector in his comments mentioned this university as being in the top 25 in patents worldwide. There's just an awful lot of good ammunition there for commercial activity. How does that happen? That doesn't happen only within the walls of the university. That has to bring the university out into the community, out into the relevant community, and establish the ecosystems, the natural ecosystems that exist. and the ecosystem that exists here in the Iran Techno Valley is just an incredible opportunity to do some of that. So in doing it and making that happen, my recommendation would be to also do research on that, also understand how that happens, and make that a lesson for other parts of the world. And finally, universities do outreach. Universities reach out into their community. And in terms of the outreach of the university, we look specifically at the place of the university in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, where faculty and students and administrators and entrepreneurs find a common place. Sometimes that common place is a physical place like this. Sometimes it's other places within a more traditional classroom or more traditional business setting, but within the relevant community. I've done a little research in this area and concluded that it's the interplay between students and faculty and the entrepreneurial community that's so important in making this happen. One of the places where this is happening in an incredible sense is at Purdue University, one of those land-grant universities that I mentioned earlier in my talk. Purdue for some time has had a place called Discovery Park. Again, my fellow advisory board member, Dr. Joe Peckney, is the director of that Discovery Park, so he's probably much better suited to talk about than I am. So Joe, if you would talk about Discovery Park. Thanks.
Well, in terms of comments of the rector this morning, he talked about ambiguity, and we live in a world of increasing uncertainty, and we also live in a world of change, and really those two are very connected. There's a rapid change causes each of us to have to get up in the morning and question what we're supposed to be doing. What's the meaning of our work today, given the change that happened last night? Purdue's answer to this is really tied up in its mission. It's in our Constitution, it's in our charter, that we must serve the community. Okay, so the land-grant institution received its original charter with the Morrill Act in 1862, and at that time the U.S. was undergoing great change for its time. We were pushing west in our country, and a lot of folks were settling on farms, and then we were taking over large expanses of land and bringing them under agriculture. And so we were formed at that time of great change in order to transmit agricultural knowledge to people who didn't have a lot of farming experience, okay? So you can see that, and I do want to connect that to Bob's comment about the University of Bologna. The University of Bologna was created, even though change was slower in that time period, 1,000 years ago, it was created in order to become a steward of knowledge and to provide a place for people who had controversy about knowledge to go work it out and to protect them from folks who didn't see the world that they did, okay? So universities have a history of responding to change from the very beginning up through Purdue University and land-grant universities in the United States. And even to today. But as the rector said, what's happening today is the change is happening so quickly that we become a little bit unmoored, a little bit queasy at the rate of change. Okay, so Discovery Park was something that we created in the early 2000s in order to respond to the fact that research was becoming very complicated and very interdisciplinary. That hard problems, knotty problems, wicked problems you would only develop approaches to those, solutions to those problems, by bringing many mental models together, okay, from across engineering, from across the university, understanding people issues and pulling those mental models all together to come up with solutions, okay? So that was the change that we responded to with Discovery Park in the early 2000s. But if you fast forward, we had an entrepreneurship center built into the original Discovery Park, but over the last 10 years since our founding, we found that the entrepreneurship and the ability to translate technology is becoming much more important, okay? And it's our university's response. It's all our university's response. It's KF UPM's response to the needs of the day, okay? One thing I want to point out, since even though universities have been around for 1,000 years, and I'm a professor, my 2,000 professor colleagues at Purdue tend to think of the university as kind of a bastion of constancy with respect to stewarding knowledge. Okay, we think that the universities in that regard, the research, the teaching, certainly the teaching has been around for 1,000 years, but research as an industrial endeavor, as a mass endeavor, only happened since the mid-20th century, okay, right after World War II. So we think of research and publishing as something that's goes back to Newton or is a constant, but in fact it's relatively new. Entrepreneurship today, since it's only been around a few years, is thought of as something foreign to the university, but in fact the entrepreneurship brings all these three missions. At Purdue, we believe that entrepreneurship is the root of the 21st century response to the Morrill Act. It's the way, instead of transferring agricultural knowledge in the 1860s, it's how we can translate rapid research from our interdisciplinary campus out to the community very quickly, okay? And it brings the students together. They're the focus of our startups. It brings the research together. Successful research ideas go into the companies, right? So it's got students and research, and it engages the community for economic transfer by the very fact that you put the startup out there. So it's an ingenious way to take those parts of the university that our faculty think of as a constant and translate it and be very efficient and be able to live in this world of change and ambiguity. Okay, so entrepreneurship is really the university answer. It's the university mindset to deal with the needs of the day. Okay, and I would also like to pass my congratulations on to Whale for taking the leadership role here in bringing that mindset to KFUPM. He's doing it with quite an exclamation point. I'll say a little bit more about that during my talk, but let me turn it back over to my colleague.
Joe, thank you very much. And I think we really have a broad general context or idea of the university in the 21st century. And I think the examples from the University of Virginia and Purdue University serve us very well in providing excellent, in a sense, case studies of how the teaching and research and outreach mission of the university can carry on through the 21st century. So let me just, if I can, wrap up by making some broad comments about the entrepreneurial university. And at least my view from having thought about this since Wal gave me the opportunity to do this keynote talk. First, maintaining the core mission of the university while taking on a leadership role. The university's job has always been the production and dissemination of knowledge. We live in a knowledge economy. What better time for the university to move to an even stronger leadership role, given that the economic environment and the university's mission have really formed this sweet spot. Secondly, creating innovative approaches to its traditional areas of teaching, research, and outreach. We've heard a couple of those innovative approaches today, but it'll remain consistent with it needs to remain consistent with the existing strengths of the university. And as you're thinking of doing this here within KFUPM, focus on those existing strengths. They're wonderful. They're incredible. And finally, the transferring of knowledge from the classroom and laboratory to the world outside the university. How does that happen? Well, it doesn't happen in silos. Breaking down those silos, doing this in a cross-campus manner. And it's the entire university community, together with the economic community, with the entrepreneurial community here, that's going to establish those ecosystems to make that happen. And you're off to a wonderful start. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. So we have, some time for like 2 questions, if there are any questions. No questions? Yes, and you can just use the mic near to you. So.
Thank you for that interesting talk. I think in your talk you talked a lot about universities as a big thing. Where does the drive come from? Is it from the students? Is it from faculty members? Is it from senior management? Is it from all of those? Where's the real energy, passion come from? Could you give us some examples?
Okay, yeah. Thanks, that's a great question. I probably should have thought about that and covered that. Entrepreneurship's about outliers. At least innovative entrepreneurship is about outliers. And I think similarly within university, it's about outliers. It's about a few individuals who really have a vision, have a passion for this thing, and can bring along colleagues. But it's those outliers with support from the leadership of the university to say, yes, this is exactly what's happening. So it's those individual outliers with the passion. It's support from the university within that ecosystem, and it's combining that with the relevant community with which that university operates, and here that would be largely the Durand Techno Valley. So it's a combination of those three things. But at the core, it's very similar to entrepreneurship. It's about that outlier. It's about that innovator. It's about that person who's willing to go out there and take a risk.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, please, join me again. Just thank Bob for an outstanding speech. Thank you.
Thank you.